Last week I made a video attempting to explain how not to screw up Mamdani mania by lecturing some of his white progressive fans on how badly they came off when a similar political movement happened in 2016 and in 2020 with Bernie Sanders. Naively, I assumed that everyone was working with similar levels of understanding about the various reasons why Sanders struggled specifically with black voters, why certain types of supporters of Bernie made that job even harder, and that a South Asian man born in Uganda is very different from what any college admissions board should think of as black or African American. So I did my usual B-sides video, which for those who don't know, these are usually shorter, lower effort videos that aren't heavily researched, that don't get a ton of revision. They're more reaction and hot take based. And that's usually enough, but I clearly didn't do a good enough job of white whispering this time. And while most people got what I was saying, it's clear that some really were struggling to get the point in earnest. Further, what makes me know I need to circle back is that I had more than a few younger black viewers take issue as well. And after talking with a few, I feel the need to re-engage more intentionally. So this time around, I'm going to try to be a bit more detailed in explaining things. And to do that, I'm actually going to spend more time talking about why Mamdani is working pretty well with black people in a way that Sanders didn't. And through that, my goal is to present what anyone should be looking to build if they want to have a similar political wave anywhere else in the country. All right. Even though I think some of this was willful misinterpretation and white fragility, I care more about the possible benefit that this information might have with people than my current frustration with all that stuff. All right. So for your benefit, I'm going to be as nice and gracious as possible. I had a joke that featured like 10 white slurs in a row here, and I'm leaving it out.
My lips are tingling from the spiciness of this conversation.
First, let me clarify my stance on Mamdani and engage with why I think this has been misinterpreted in good faith by a lot of people. I am a Mamdani fan. I have been casually paying attention to him since his emergence in the last few months. I've watched a lot of his stuff in the last few weeks, and while there's critiques around electoralism and establishment-based politics that we do have to contend with, I do not care right now. At the end of the day, if his leadership could benefit regular people as well as benefit other similar movements nationwide, that's all that really matters to me right now. And I think what a lot of young black folks, especially New Yorkers, made clear is that my jaded fears about Mamdani, which I kind of led with, aren't really useful right now. And you know what? Y'all are right. I am struggling to see past my own cynicism in electoral politics, so much so that to me it seems completely obvious that the only way to engage with this is cynicism. And that's wrong of me as a person with a large platform who purports to want to be a good elder. I shouldn't be pushing off my political trauma on y'all. I should be doing what I can to support. I'm sorry about that. The goal of what I had in mind, though, is bigger than Mamdani. What everyone outside of New York is thinking is that Mamdani's success is something that needs to be replicated nationwide, if possible on a federal level. Mamdani represents the possibility of a trend with the DSA and other actually left parties to seize power within the Democratic Party. People are talking about primarying Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, and a lot of people are hoping that AOC runs for president. And again, you can take issue with the DSA and certain further left parties for a valid reason, but to me, it's not enough to not want to support their growth and want to grow it at scale as they go against two overtly fascist and genocidal parties. And this is something that got its gestation with Bernie Sanders in 2016. For all of his flaws, Bernie Sanders is overtly responsible for the sudden rise of a populist, visible, and active leftist wave of thought in America. Again, imperfect, as I'll get to later, but for the first time in like 50 years, it's alive, and that is a start. But Bernie was unsuccessful in both of his presidential bids, and the reasons for that is varied, and there are good explanations out there for most of those things. But what I really want to focus on is how he failed to make any headway with black voters in two different campaigns. While much of that blame is at the hands of the establishment politics of the Democrats and Jim Clyburn, it's not enough to just leave it at that. You can't just willingly cede black voters over the age of 50 who traditionally vote more than young people and vote more consistently and predictably than young people to the establishment without a fight. But I realize that a lot of folks aren't super interested in doing that particular analysis, and if they are, they don't know where to start. So here we are. But to start, I figure it might be better to create understanding with certain leftists in the crowd if I start with using Mamdani as an example of how to engage with and appeal with black voters as opposed to how Bernie had. Because one thing that I wish I'd have made more clear is that aside from this college application nonsense, which happened when he was 17, Mamdani has done a masterful job appealing to younger black voters, and he's positioning himself to penetrate older black voters in a way that Bernie never did. So if we can all see and agree on that, then all we have to do is learn and observe, and we'll know what to do, and importantly, what not to do. Like as it pertains to that college application thing, and this is God willingly going to be the last time I bring this up. I've done more research on that since the last video because people were calling it a right-wing psyop, and no, it's not. Was it brought to us by right-wing, journalism or whatever else? Yes, that is true. But is there no validity in what's being reported and it's false? No, that's not true. And no, the category of black or African American was never meant to include a South Asian man born in Uganda. Mamdani may not have known this at 17. I think he did, but I don't care. I don't even want to talk about it right now. But he knows it now, and he explained himself and moved on. For the life of me, I do not understand why some of you felt like you needed to do more in defense of this than he did. Why are so many white people trying to explain to black people what college applications mean when they use the phrase black or African American? This is a actually asked argument. Leave it alone. Because I need y'all to understand, and I wish this would have come across better. The problem here isn't the facts of the issue, the fact that he checked the wrong box. It's the conversation that spills out from it, how it derails and goes into areas that are unwinnable conversations for him and the left in general. The game that is being played isn't about Mamdani, it's about making this issue a debate in the first place. New York Times and Eric Adams know this isn't something that will actually hurt him directly, but what can hurt him is forcing this issue to be a regular topic of discussion for him in the media, and most significantly with argumentative non-black progressives who don't have the discipline to not think they can explain the real meaning of African American to African Americans. I could go on and explain further why this is dumb and offensive. I went in on it on a live last week, but I actually immediately private that live because I realized if I kept arguing with y'all about this, I'm just doing the devil's work for him. It's just a distraction at this point that takes away from the ultimate goal, which is something Mamdani himself understood when he addressed it as directly as he did. And I'm just going to say it with me: follow Mamdani's lead. It's the same energy that Mamdani had when somebody asked me if he was going to visit Israel after he became mayor of New York. He basically said, my job is here in New York. I don't want to talk about that. He didn't get sidetracked. He stayed on topic and then moved on. So moving on, let's examine why Bernie did so poorly with black voters in a way that Mamdani is repeating in some ways, but defying in others, and what's to be learned from that. I'm going to try to keep it simple, but be somewhat detailed here because this is a complex conversation. But the easiest answer as to why Bernie could not connect with black voters is that the vibes are off. Bernie did not look or act the part of a political figure who was greatly engaged with and invested in the needs of black people, especially your typical black liberals, black moderates, normal black people that go to work every day, that aren't chronically online and aren't greatly politically engaged. The types of people that you might call a low information voter if you're really fucking stupid and low-key racist. This answer will probably frustrate a lot of you, so I'm going to try to be more specific. So I need you to actually listen before you react. All you react Andes that are gonna watch it, I need you to take your sweaty fingers off the mouse for a second and digest what's actually being said before interrupting the flow. Say all you want that Bernie marched in MLK in the 60s, which you all certainly do, but from the 70s till now, he decided to live in literally the second whitest state in the country, and black people can tell. Not based off his politics, which is the thing that I need y'all to understand, but the fact that he made no friends, no allies among black political power brokers in his 40 years of public service, and no supporting Jesse Jackson in the 80s does not count. When Bernie Sanders emerged on the scene in 2016, most black folks that were interested in politics did not know who he was, and that is a problem. The left complains a lot about Jim Clyburn, and rightfully so. He is awful and has done awful things to hurt progressive politics and underserve black people so that they only can get scraps from Democrats after they've been offering way more than that for decades. But I need you to understand, But he isn't able to do that through some magic scroll or even with the explicit backing and support of the Democratic establishment. He's in that position because he spent the last 40 years building a strong coalition among Black political power brokers all over the country and especially the South. As I said in another video, Clyburn has built a political infrastructure around him that gives him access to countless Black institutions. HBCUs, which are historically Black colleges, for those of you in there that don't know what that is, Black churches, Black Greek letter organizations, Black nonprofits, anyone who is in charge of any organization that collects and engages with Black communities is probably only a few degrees separated from Jim Clyburn because he has purposely built that infrastructure over his career. And it's that infrastructure that has made him valuable to the Democratic establishment because he then positioned himself to be the vessel through which those scraps that they give to Black people finally make it back in the Black community. Again, this is awful. Clyburn is awful, but his tactics are not. His tactics are what we need to be replicating because all he did was organize. And this is not something that Bernie did in Vermont. When Bernie popped out in 2016, it was immediately obvious that he hadn't actually been in community with Black folks since MLK in the 60s. The phrase, "whose mans is this?" was very appropriate. And his response to that phrase wasn't the appropriate response. Instead, he went and sought approval from Black celebrities and academics, people like Killer Mike and Cornel West. And this was very impressive to white people. Don't get me wrong, Killer Mike is very much loved and respected in Black spaces, but that's something that he's done over the course of the last decade, because in 2016, he was not a super significant figure in hip hop. He was literally often called your favorite rapper's favorite rapper because he wasn't that popular. Run the Jewels was not being played on Black radio stations. His fan base was as white as his group mate. And Cornel West is pretty much the same story, respected by Black folks in the know and in academia or whatever, but invisible and insignificant to everyone except for the politically inclined and academic crowd. Eventually, Bernie did start making more efforts to get into Black spaces. He got interviewed by the Breakfast Club for like 15 minutes, but the whole time it was still obvious to Black people that this was not someone invested in Black people up to this point. And this is all without going into the not so great moments with Black Lives Matter on stage or saying that he doesn't believe in reparations multiple times without a very good answer. Instead, Bernie just kept insisting that his political goals would help Black people, and he just expected folks to be like, oh, wow, you know, healthcare does cost too much, and I never considered voting for a person who wanted free healthcare.
Why not support reparations then?
Well, what do you mean by reparations?
So what is your position specifically on reparations? I asked the question because Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, they've indicated they want to support. What does that
mean? What do they mean?
Now, why does it seem like this week you've been kind of dodging the reparations question? Senator Harris and Senator Warren have both kind of spoken out and said that they agree with some form of reparations.
Well, the question is, I'm not dodging the question. The question is, what do we mean?
We really want to talk about what are you going to do about reparations?
You can get a photo. You go. Yeah, go. I'm not a selfie.
We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, especially within the African American community. So when I've said Black 50 times. All right, that's the 51st time.
Throughout Black history, politicians, both Black and white, come into Black spaces with allegedly good intentions, promising the world, and then never return after you get their vote. That is something that Black people are very used to. There's other elements to this process, right? But that is the reality. So no amount of presenting good politics is going to convince a lot of Black voters, especially older ones who have seen this multiple times before. So when someone asks what Bernie Sanders' connection is to Black people and Black communities in 2016, and you keep on pointing out something he did in 1963, it comes off condescending and tone deaf. Marching with King is dope, but it was clear looking at Sanders and his team that there were pretty much no Black folks involved. And then in 2020, when he did do a lot more to build a more diverse infrastructure, it seemed like they were hamstrung by any real dedication to the type of work needed to build inroads with Black voters. A Washington Post article in 2020 that interviewed his own Black campaign staffers said that his team all but refused to put in the needed effort to build inroads with Black voters. Quote, others who worked in the state said some of the campaign's decisions amounted to political malpractice. They faulted national campaign officials for deploying what they viewed as unseasoned strategists, not advertising more aggressively on television and Black radio, and missing opportunities to bring Sanders in for FaceTime with Black leaders and Black voters. Even more basic needs, such as yard signs, became a source of angst, they said, citing a stark shortage in a state where visibility is a big part of the political culture. Inexperienced state leadership, said Hyman, who gave speeches for Sanders, was very slow to respond and to take any risk or broaden our base or to push for some of what we thought were common sense suggestions. One idea, for example, was for Sanders to visit a convention of Baptist ministers, according to Gilliard and Thigpen, who said that plan was rejected by higher ups. Jessica Bright, who served as state director, said the decision was more of a scheduling conflict. It wasn't anything outside of that realm. So let's talk about the black church for a second. I grew up Muslim. I did not grow up in the church, and for a long time, I didn't have much respect or appreciation for the church for all the reasons I'm sure you can think of. And I'm not gonna sit here and act like those reasons are invalid and that the black church does not have a ton of problems, because it does. And these problems have led it to the brink of extinction at this point, and it's why a lot of Black Zs and millennials are completely disinterested in it. However, two things can be true at once. There are tons of black churches with radically different political inclinations than most of you realize, which isn't too hard to believe if you actually understand the history of the black church, and Lil Bill has a great video on liberation theology that you all can watch after this. But the worst black churches still have something that the left does not: the power and access to a mass organizing infrastructure that can bring people to do things at the drop of a dime. A lot of you may not even know this, but are you aware that Target has been the subject of a black consumer boycott since the beginning of the year, partly organized by Dr. Jamal Bryant here in Atlanta? A few months ago, he announced on a Sunday that there was going to be a panel discussion around the boycott on the following Tuesday, 48 hours notice, and he got probably 1,000 people to show up, including myself and including Nina Turner. Now, you may say to yourself, a consumer boycott isn't some bastion of leftist political action, and you're right. It's definitely not what I would do if I had that type of organizing power, but I don't. And we need to respect that this is such an immensely powerful tool, both today and historically, that we've just given away because we think that these people are unreachable and impossible to engage with. We're ignoring it because older black people are too conservative and low information voters, and meanwhile, Target is trying to figure out how it's going to survive in the future because of this boycott. And I'm sorry, I don't really think the black church is so much more conservative in 2025 than it was in the 1960s when it was leading a leftist movement. The black church has been the center of revolutionary action and resistance for black people since slavery. It's why so much effort has been put into degrading it over the last 50 years to neutralize its effectiveness as a legitimate and dangerous organizing tool. So my boy Sean the Black, who was nicer to my video than others, when he watched it, he made the mistake of thinking that I wasn't serious when I said some of you Gen Z, some of you do need to start going to church. Not everyone, right? Please don't go expose yourself to harm and entering religious spaces when you know you won't be welcomed and you'll be triggered, and engaging with people that are going to be hard to penetrate and deal with in those moments. I'm not asking for people to re-traumatize themselves by entering into a space that they think is harmful, but some of you can easily go to church, and you should. Not to worship and save your soul or whatever, but to actually engage with the types of people that are going to be there, that are invested in community and organizing and progress and action, that are doing it without a leftist influence involved in what they're doing. That's where you might fit in. And I think some of the resistance here is because progressives tend not to recognize their own biases and prejudices against the wrong types of people that don't have good politics. And then you wonder why you can't build coalitions and why those same people vote against their own self-interest when, are you sure you're actually presenting their self-interest when you talk to them and engage with them? I can't help but look at what some people say they're building when they say they're building a people's movement and notice that certain types of people aren't present in their movement. So going back to Bernie, the idea that he had time to talk about marching with MLK 50 years ago, but couldn't find time in his schedule to meet with church leaders in 2020 is damning. That's the wrong type of pandering. It's the type of pandering that shows you haven't been in community enough to update your pandering resume. It was the hello fellow teenagers of pandering. On the flip side, this is what high quality pandering looks like. That's Zoran Mamdani at a Haitian concert in New York using colloquial Haitian language, speaking specifically to issues that Haitians care about, and even bringing up the Haitian history of anti-colonial revolution. That's a level of investment and knowledge that a lot of you aren't even capable of engaging with. This is Mamdani quoting Reverend Al Sharpton in front of Reverend Al Sharpton at a Harlem church sitting next to Spike Lee. Say it with me. Follow Mamdani's lead. And I don't think too many people, especially black voters, are somehow oblivious to when they're getting pandered to. Anyone that says, oh, that's pandering as if that's a bad thing. No, that's their fucking job as a politician. But if you're going to pander well. Do it in ways that shows that you're actually currently paying attention. Don't quote MLK to black people. Instead, go on the Breakfast Club and subtly point out how locked in you are with hip hop culture by showing that you're aware of a rap legend's voting habits because of how much they hate taxes.
And the second is taxing the top 1% of New Yorkers. We're talking about people who make $1 million a year or more, taxing them just by a flat 2% tax increase. And I know if 50 Cent is listening, he's not going to be happy about this. He tends to not like this tax policy, but I want to be very clear. This is about $20,000 a year. It's a rounding error. And all of these things together, they make every New Yorker's life better, including those who are actually getting taxed.
Now, you also...
These two things are not the same. Going back to the whole older black voters are just very conservative. And I've even heard this from younger black folks as well. And I got to say, that's not good enough. Not only is this a poor characterization of that voting bloc that borders on anti-blackness, it also doesn't matter if your goal is winning nationwide. The bottom line is this: old people vote and young people do not. Period. Historically, that is the case. At no time in recent history has that ever been not the case. This means that you need to do the work to activate that older black voting bloc to improve your chances in most places. This is not trying to take away from how great Mamdani did with young voters and young black voters, but I'm saying for everyone else, that is not something you should count on replicating. As I've explained in other videos, a lot of black people, specifically older black people, are lowercase conservatives versus uppercase conservatives. Understand, lowercase conservatism is still bad. That's your respectability politics, that's your homophobia, that's your love of black capitalism, that's your xenophobia from the likes of ADOS and FBA, etc. However, that conservatism is driven by lack and survival instinct, not from an actual belief in conservative policies. It's not people being conservative because they think that's the right thing to do. It's believing that those things are more likely to lead to survival. And this is why, despite the conservatism of black people, we never vote for Republicans like y'all do. And we never will. Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not a thing. Research historically has shown that when it comes to negative views of capitalism and positive views of socialism and support for socialist policies, black people have always consistently shown themselves to be more amenable and further left than any other racial group in this country. And this reflects black historical figures back in the civil rights movement all the way to W.E.B. Du Bois. In 2014, in New York's mayoral race, Bill de Blasio was the most progressive candidate at the time, and he won greatly because of black voters of all ages and class backgrounds against another black candidate. So this idea that older black voters are too conservative to be reached is just not true. What motivates moderate black voters is what they actually see and experience. And what they often see and experience are progressives and white liberals who helped gentrify New York in the first place, making it so they couldn't afford where they used to live. People that don't respect them and their ability to self-govern and feel entitled to their support because they have good politics. You don't get a cookie for having good politics. If you have bad praxis and antisocial tendencies, you don't deserve community or support just for having good ideas, and you cannot build a political movement just by winning debates in the marketplace of ideas. Research on debates show that very few people have their opinions changed by watching an argument. Conversely, exposure to certain ideas and engagement with communities has always been a predictor of ideological change. That's what Mamdani is doing. And to give him credit, that's what Bernie had going for him as well. It's good that he activated a generation of millennials and now Zs to bring leftist ideology back to the mainstream, but now it's important to not just relax in that position and coalition. It's not enough. Everyone should be doing what Mamdani is doing to build a bigger coalition, not creating a stan culture around him. Everyone should be, say it with me, following Mamdani's lead. Because for what it's worth, from what I've seen from dude, he knows everything I'm saying already. He recognizes exactly what I'm talking about because unlike most of you, he has a degree in African American studies. He literally called it more than an academic pursuit. It was a moral lens. Maybe some of y'all should do some of that reading. Mamdani, if you watch this, hit the streets with a reading list so that maybe some of your followers can unlearn some bad habits. He's not coming to black voters with good ideas, expecting them to fall in line. He's returning to communities he's already built relationships with, because that's what the power is. And that's how Clyburn does what he does, which is probably why recently even Jim Clyburn endorsed Zoran Mamdani. Yes, even the so-called kingmaker had to kiss the ring this one time.
I lost 3 times before I got elected to the office. When I lost in the Democratic primary, I endorsed and supported the person that beat me. So I endorsed Cuomo. I'm now supporting the guy that beat him. That's what it's called being a good Democrat is all about.
And I need y'all to see how critical of a thing that is, because this man has the juice.
I'm so sorry for absolutely nothing!
And all I want to do, all shade aside, is contribute to the mass production of Mamdani juice. I want to squeeze all the juice out of Zoran Mamdani and spread it everywhere around the country. And I know you guys do too. So please be less invested in winning arguments, less invested. I wanted to keep a straight face while saying that. So please be less invested in winning arguments, less invested in ideological dominance, and more invested in coalition building, more invested in winning hearts and minds and building community. And all of that is going to be hard if people, myself included, don't know when to shut up. So with that said, this is all I have left for this topic, I hope. I'm FD Signifier, and this has been Light Work.